Uh, and one of the main questions that we ask as we're starting here is like, if you found it difficult to talk with families and communities about the adverse childhood experiences studies and its relationship to substance misuse. If so, you are definitely in the right place, and you are not alone, as you can see, because beginning with highlighting awareness of toxic stress and its impact on child development, this workshop is going to use a strength-based approach and a trauma-informed lens to focus on positive childhood experiences, as well as ways to build resilience. The workshop will offer examples of evidence-based strategies and promising community practices that promote healthy youth development and prevent substance misuse. Our acknowledgement slide clearly states that the opinions expressed herein are the view of the PTTC network, and they do not reflect the official position of the Department of Health and Human Services or SAMHSA. And there's no official support or endorsement of DHHS or SAMHSA for the opinions that you will hear described in this document. It's not to be intended or even inferred. These are our objectives for today. We're going to help everyone that leaves here today will be able to explain how to discuss ACEs with family and friends, and also to identify some strategies to prevent ACEs and build resilience in families and communities. This is our next slide. This is our roadmap for the service. We will provide you an overview of adverse childhood experiences and their impact on our lives. We'll discuss the power of positive childhood experiences and prepare you to have critical conversations about ACEs with family, friends, and community members, and provide you with some good examples and conversation starters to take away with you for your toolkit. Next slide. Without further ado, I want to introduce our speaker. Fabricia Prado is a clinical social work therapist, and she's based out of Marietta, Georgia, here in the United States. Fabricia specializes in the counseling of anxiety, depression, trauma, and PTSD, among many other topics. She's an extensive experience as well as a therapist handling cases of ADHD, which we've seen in many cases of people with ACEs trauma, but also anger management and family conflict and sexual abuse and more. In her practice, Fabricia offers acceptance and commitment therapy, cognitive behavioral therapy, and much more. She is a master ACE trainer, and her contact information is going to be shared with you here at the end, and also it's shared on our PTTC website as one of our master trainers. Before Fabricia takes the microphone, I want to ask you a question and take a brief poll with you. The question is, what makes it difficult for you to introduce the ACE talk with family and communities? Is it that you don't know how to start the conversations, or is it that you don't feel confident about your knowledge level? Or is it that you're afraid of people's reaction? Or is it that you just don't feel confident enough to do it? Or maybe it's just, I don't like it. I think it's unnecessary and helpful. So look at the poll that has popped up, and I want everyone to participate in there and let us know how you feel about this. What makes it difficult for you? There is no wrong answer. As the polls are coming in, I give you Fabricia Prado.
Hello, everyone. And I'm so thankful to be here again with the Southwest PTTC and this amazing team that can organize these webinars and facilitate learning. I share the results of, I don't know if you can see the results of the polling. Can you see or no? I don't think so, right? I can see it. And we had 38% majority of the respondents saying that I don't feel confident about my knowledge level. But we also had 25% saying I do it often and I feel confident about it. And 22% saying I don't know how to start the conversation. So very interesting. And I'm very excited to start this conversation with you today. So notice that the title of this conversation is continuing the conversation about ACEs, which means that at some point we have already started it here in the South-Southwest PTTC. And I ask Lori or one of the teams to share some links in the chat, please, so you can have access. You can subscribe to the PTTC YouTube channel, and you can watch all the recordings of previous webinars when we started this conversation about ACEs. And we can catch up of some things that I won't be going back today, although this is not a pre-requirement. So I want to encourage to the South-Southwest PTTC YouTube channel and watch these conversations in another time. So here we are again talking about ACEs, continuing this conversation. And why do we talk about ACEs so much? There are other public health problems, right? And why do you have to talk about ACEs with family and friends? It's so uncomfortable. It is true, but we want to help you feel prepared, equipped to overcome this awkwardness and feel good about being able to talk about ACEs. So there are many benefits of sharing the knowledge of how common ACEs really are. For many people, it's freeing to finally know that I am not alone after all. If no one is talking about childhood trauma and toxic stress, people who suffered from this will be feeling alone, like no one else understood what their life has been like. But their experiences are actually quite common. It is also important to help people understand the effects of ACEs on neurobiology and that many people experience the world in a different way because of it. So it isn't enough to just tell someone, don't worry so much, don't be anxious, or just calm down. Neuroscience has shown that people with a high number of ACEs can have a stronger and faster response from their amygdala. The fear response system of their brain can be different than people with lower or no ACE score. So this knowledge can lead us to be more understanding of another person's behavior or our own behavior. It can help us move from judgment to empathy. In addition, this knowledge has helped people to feel less shame about their childhoods. As more and more people talk about their pasts, discussion about ACEs is normalized. People start to relate with each other on this topic and find more people in their community, in their families who understand them, expanding their social support. Now, you can see in this slide other reasons. ACEs disrupt neurodevelopment, increasing risk factor for major causes of disease, disability, social problems, and early death. ACEs affect families and communities. ACEs are a serious public health issue, and ACEs are preventable. So I want you to think now and answer in the chat, if you can, please. What else? What other reasons you have to invest in efforts to prevent ACEs? And please type your answer in the chat so we can see. I want you to know that this moment today, we're doing a workshop. This is a very hands-on thing. I want you to take this time now to be prepared. This is not going to be a later, I do that. Someday when I have time, I do that. We're going to do this today. Today we are together, 197 people here together, getting ready to say, I feel prepared. I want to start, or if I have already started, I want to deepen this conversation about ACEs and positive childhood experiences as well in my communities, with the families I work with, and normalize and feel empowered by these conversations.
You have
So in the chat, okay.
You have answers coming in, Fabricia. One of them, reduce substance misuse and abuse. You have optimize human potential.
Mhm.
You have more prevention efforts and services for children of risk of ACEs. And the more ACEs a person has, the more risk for disease later in life, and also to improve outcomes for mental health and physical health. Someone else said the ACEs can be generational and to help our society be better, and also to encourage compassion and interaction we have with one another. And the answers continue to flow in.
Wonderful. This is all right answers. And I believe these answers come from your own experience, your personal experience, or your experience working with people who you know have been affected by ACEs. Think about it. Possibly almost everything else is linked to ACEs. Preventionists like to identify the root causes of problems, ACEs. So the findings from the ACEs study offer us hope because what can be predicted can be prevented. It can tip a child's development trajectory and affect physiology. It can trigger chronic inflammation and hormonal changes that can last a lifetime. Think about it. It can alter the way DNA is read and how cells replicate. It can dramatically increase heart disease, stroke, cancer, diabetes, and more. So we have reasons to invest in preventing ACEs. And look, we are taking this time now to look carefully at it and become ready to deepen our conversations about ACEs. So thank you for everyone who responded. I appreciate your participation and I encourage you throughout the presentation. ACEs are common. 61% of adults had at least one ACE, and 16% had 4 or more types of ACEs. Females and several racial and ethnic minority groups were at a greater risk for experiencing 4 or more ACEs. When one ACE is present, normally others come along. They come in clusters. Think about it. How common is that physical abuse comes with emotional abuse? Will, for example, a parent using corporal discipline, we just use physical abuse, or with that comes words like insults, putting down, humiliation, right? Normally, they are combined. So the accumulation of ACEs, which is captured by the ACE score, which goes from 0 to 10, has a strong impact on the risk of multiple health and social problems, and it is a good proxy measure of the dose of toxic stress experienced during childhood. Parents' own adverse or positive childhood experiences may influence the transmission of ACEs across generations. Children's risk for ACEs and potential for resilience may be linked to the early child raising experiences of their parents carried forward into parenting practices. So the intergenerational transmission of ACEs. People who report higher ACE scores are more likely to have health and social problems, some of which increase the odds of their children having high ACE scores. In fact, as the ACE score goes up, the percentage of people with health and social problems also goes up. We call this a dose-response relationship, where there is a higher dose of adverse childhood experiences, the higher the percentage of people with health problems. More ACEs, more problems. You can see in the columns, for example, the percentage of health problems, how it increases from 0 to 5, just compare the columns from 0 to 5 ACEs and the percentage of health problems in adulthood. So how do we put it together to make a case for understanding ACEs as a powerful pathway to healing and well-being? We understand that ACEs are common and have a strong cumulative impact on the risk of common health and social problems. Preventing ACEs and their intergenerational transmission is the greatest opportunity for improving the well-being of human populations. If you are here because you want to do well, you want to make a difference and do good in the world, we have to work with ACEs. The chances of having risk factors, health and social problems increase as the ACE score goes up. This slide shows the percentage of various health and social problems that epidemiologists estimate is caused by ACEs. The calculation that is commonly used to do this in public health studies is called population attributable risk. This is displayed as the percentage as an oil spill on the slide. The percentage of a problem quoted by the oil spill represents the percentage of each problem that is potentially preventable by preventing ACEs. Look at the highest ones. Look at life dissatisfaction and suicide, 67%. The part quoted by the oil spill is how much preventing ACEs can potentially prevent these two outcomes. This reflects a powerful opportunity for prevention. No matter if you are working to prevent heart disease or cancer, infants' death, and homelessness, or reduce somatic symptoms in professionals working high-stress jobs. As we align a portion of our work around this common goal of preventing the accumulation of ACEs and moderating their effects, we will reduce all of these problems and many others all at once. Exciting. We must remember that ACEs create risk, not destiny. The ACEs talk has two sides. One, we want to warn about ACEs and focus on ACEs awareness and prevention. We want to call attention to it, allow people to learn and be alert about ACEs. But also, we want to instill hope and guide our family and friends, starting by identifying what is good, what is right, what is appropriate, and evidence-based to empower them. The empowerment and the empowering effect of understanding an ACE-filled life in perspective, it's not what's wrong with us, what's wrong with me, with you. It's what happened to me, what happened to you, what happened to us. Understanding that ACEs are intergenerational can motivate change to protect the next generation. How many parents we work with are motivated to make change because they want to protect the next generation? They're saying, I want it to stop in me, like enough, it will stop in me. So there is an individual and collective level. So now in the chat, I want you to think and answer, what are the strengths of, or what are the ACEs that you work with? What are you concerned about? What are the things that you work with that shows up to you that you have to deal with in your day-to-day that you'd like to share with us today?
You could please answer in the chat now. How are ACEs affecting your communities? Substance misuse. Children experiencing substance misuse. Oh my goodness. Absent parents. Parents, we see it in the elementary school level with behaviors of students. Divorce and drug addiction, depression and suicide, juvenile substance misuse, lack of community, traumatic backgrounds, dysfunctional families. Oh my goodness. We are definitely talking with the right audience. You are aware of your community, and you see how ACEs is affecting your community.
Thank you
Right.
for the, yes. Thank you for the answers. And I see a lot of people answering about substance use, misuse. Let's be aware of, let's start making that link, that connection, because most of the time, people don't come to us making that connection. What we are experiencing now as a community, as a family, as a member of a family, as an individual, and making automatically that link with my childhood experiences, right? So if we are already making that link and making that connection, look at it and understanding the adaptations that, especially substance use, right? The adaptations that people commonly use to survive toxic stress, we can already start making sense of their experiences in a non-judgmental way. So now we are going to transition to start talking about resilience and positive childhood experiences. Wait a minute, we haven't talked about, just a sec. We haven't talked a lot about ACEs, and you may feel like, well, but we need to pay attention to ACEs. Again, like we can visit these previous presentations about ACEs if that's still a little bit unfamiliar to you. But we want to, in this presentation, invite you to also now focus on resilience and positive childhood experiences and take this route to also address ACEs. And you see how combining both will help us to be able to navigate these difficult conversations in a smoother way, okay? Because we also have the positive experiences to bring up. So psychologists define resilience as the process of adaptation in the face of adversity, trauma, tragedy, threats, or significant sources of stress. As much as resilience involves stepping back from these difficult experiences, it can also involve profound personal growth. Positive childhood experiences, which we are going to call PCEs from now on, are experiences in childhood that build a child's sense of belongingness, connection, and support that may co-occur with adverse childhood experiences and attenuate its potential negative health outcomes. So can they coexist? Yes, that's most likely our experience. We are experiencing watching this happening at the same time. The more we understand about which protective factors are the most helpful for different populations and desired health outcomes, more communities can strategically plan to implement them to promote resilience and mitigate the toxic effects of ACEs. I would like to make an important point here about the use of the word resilience, and I want you to pay attention to this now. Resilience had been weaponized as a term used to marginalize, oppress, or trivialize individual and community suffering. It can be considered an insult to expect that certain communities should simply bounce back from poverty, racism, insecure housing, and discrimination, for example. So in our ACE talk with family and friends, we need to be wise in the timing and the manner that we bring ideas such as resilience, positive childhood experiences, and post-traumatic growth. Because if we do it too soon, right in the beginning, before validating long enough the brutal, painful reality of trauma, and especially the realities that minority groups have lived on, we may risk re-traumatization by telling marginalized communities that they'll be okay, or maybe they can just tolerate a little more, completely ignoring their realities. I don't know if you have experienced that, but sometimes if people are coming sharing their stories of trauma and toxic stress, adversity, you don't want to jump too fast in saying, you'll be okay. Sometimes people need to hear that. They want to hear you saying, you'll be okay. You can recover from it. But we don't want to do it too soon before validating how painful, how difficult, how harmful their stories of trauma is. Another point I'd like to make is about the question I often hear: can resilience be developed or it is innate? Can we build resilience, or some people are just, they were born more resilient than others? What are your thoughts on that? Let's see if you can share a couple of words in the chat.
So far, Tosin said it can be developed. Alicia says, I believe it's developed. Looks like it's trending toward it is developed and it can be learned.
Yes, we are all going the right direction. It can be learned. The easiest way to think about it, I like to use this analogy. Think about looking at our bodies. If we want to develop some muscles in our body, we take our bodies to the gym or we do certain specific exercises. So if we want to develop psychological resilience, we need to take our minds and our brains to the resilience gym or the spa, so you can develop strength by using some strategies to exercise and develop these muscles, these strengths that we may not even know are there, or they're underdeveloped, or we didn't pay enough attention to them. We can use like self-care, healing, corrective experiences through positive relationships, community and social support. We can become resilient, even within our own genetics, limitations, and predisposition. So that's so hopeful to embrace that. Now let's talk a little bit about the study, right? The Johns Hopkins study published in 2019, showing that PCEs predict positive outcomes, including a child's good health now and in adulthood, and success in school. So what are we talking about here? We're talking about some experiences that can help with health and success in school that we can foster during childhood. So for this specific study, researchers surveyed about 6,000 adults and asked them yes or no if in childhood they felt, look at this, before 18, did you feel able to talk to family and friends about feelings? If they felt that their family stood by them during difficult times, enjoyed participating in community traditions, felt a sense of belonging in high school, felt supported by friends, had at least 2 non-parents adults who took an interest in them, and felt safe and protected by an adult in their home. These associations held true even when respondents reported multiple adverse childhood experiences. So you're studying, remember, this is a workshop, we're not doing it later. You're looking at these 7 factors and you're memorizing them. You were paying attention to them in your next conversation with your family and communities. We are going to be thinking about it. You're going to become a detective of what's right, what is happening, what can I boost that is positive in their experiences. And we have these factors, the 7 factors that are telling us this will help booster the effects of ACEs. So we need to be really tuned in with these factors. Would you think that having experienced PCs can increase or decrease the odds of depression or poor mental health as an adult? Wow, look how fascinating this is. For some individuals with some exposure to ACEs, those who reported having 6 or 7 positive childhood experiences, the odds of depression and poor mental health outcome dropped to 12.6%. For those who reported having 3 or 5 PCs, it dropped to 25.1%. And for those who reported only 0 or 2 PCEs, the odds for depression or poor mental health in adulthood was 8.2, dropped 8.2, was 48.2%. So the highest number of reported positive childhood experiences had 72% lower odds of adulthood depression or poor mental health when compared to those with the least number of reported PCEs. This is amazing. These associations held true even when the participants reported multiple ACEs. If a child doesn't get to have these positive childhood experiences, what would happen? Someone who is there down the 0 or 1. The absence of these types of experiences can be very stressful for a child. Without positive nurturance, children's stress hormones can get stuck in that fight and flight or freeze and fawn mode, and this impacts how their brain develops in a way that can make it hard for them later in life to experience, or even during childhood, to experience safety, to be able to relax and to become open, curious, and learn and have positive relationships with others. So let's highlight the importance of PCEs. Even more, what we are seeing in this graph is the answer to. If someone has 3 or more ACEs, which factors can reduce the odds that this person will potentially develop depression? And the answer is this. The factors that moderated the effects of having more than 3 ACEs on adult depression are, look at this, family stood by me, enjoyed community traditions, sense of belonging at high school, and felt supported by friends. So again, we are studying now. We are memorizing these factors. You are tuning in with these factors. Next time you talk to a community, a family member, the population you work with, you are paying attention to that. Do you have that? Are you having that? Can we create that? Can we make that happen to you? Isn't it better to look at the positive? I think so. Now, this data, we are looking at we're looking at mental health and support. Just a second, let me see if I'm in the right slide. Okay, I'm not, I was not in the right slide. Now I am. This data about mental health support is based on analysis of Washington State Behavior Risk Factor Surveillance System, BRFSS. This is a random telephone survey of adults conducted in each state by the state's health authority in partnership with the CDC. The primary focus of the BRFSS is to monitor the health of adults in the US. In the light blue column, we can see how people with high support and hope, even when they have a high ACE score, can have less time lost due to poor mental health. What we see here reflects a bidirectional effect. Health problems may escalate in the absence of positive experience, and childhood adversity might be making it harder for a group of people to experience support or receive practical help. Some people may find it difficult to experience social or emotional support or hope because of the way their nervous system adapted to trauma or chronic adversity during development. Those people would show up in the bar graphs of people with low social emotional support and hope, who have higher rates of health problems. Yet this group may still benefit when people they know develop more competencies for providing trauma-informed help and support. To do this, We need to be intentional about asking the people most affected by adversity. Have you ever had a moment when you felt socially or emotionally supported? What was happening in that moment? We need to know that. So I have good news for those of us who are eager to make a difference in children's and families' lives. There are things we can start doing right now. We can interrupt the current societal pattern of rejecting and isolating people most affected by ACEs, which is hurting too many people and fueling a cycle of adversity. We can make sure that every person in our neighborhood has at least 2 people who will show up and help when asked. We can reach outside of our own social circle to give or receive help or support. And we have already been practicing all that since the pandemic. Remember, when we are all reaching out and being so helpful, including outside of our circles. We cannot lose that momentum. Building relationships that provide security and belonging. You become the norm as we learn and improve our skills and competencies to be relevant and helpful during times of stress and challenge. And also, you want to know what to do when it's time of celebration and rest. So now another question in the chat. Have you ever had a moment when you felt supported in life? Let's share our positive experiences of support.
Yes. So many, lots of times. Yes. Got a lot of people who've experienced some PCEs in here. We get a lot of yeses. Does anyone want to give an example? Okay, there we go. My grandmothers were there for my escape. College, my first child. Always had many family members. My grandparents saved my childhood. Oh, wow.
Yes, I love that. I love that. Thank you for sharing. So precious, these experiences. It's so important when parents may be overwhelmed or struggling with substance misuse or other issues, and there's someone else in the family, grandparents, an aunt. So many people are so important in the family that you show up and embrace that child and be that buffer and be that presence in that person that will connect with that child and help them to regulate their nervous system and help them to cope with that adversity and buffer the potentially negative effects of ACEs. We all need that, and we all need to be that, to become that. This is a motivation for us to also heal and take care of ourselves because we want to be this person for somebody else, right? We want to be able to do that. But if we are not healed yet, if you're still struggling, it might take us longer. So that's motivation for us to also be ambitious about working in ourselves. Now, in this slide, we can see the percentage of parental depression in parents with an ACE score of 3 or higher and low reciprocity or low mutual benefit exchanges. That's what I'm calling reciprocity. What are these benefit exchanges? It's like when, for example, neighbors and family watch out for each other's children, ask for advice, or watch each other's property, and so on. So when parents receive the social support, it can have a tremendous effect. Studies have shown that when parents with high ACE scores don't have social support, their children can have high ACE scores as well. However, receiving the support they need can reduce their stress level and help them to have more hope for the future and that of their children. Among other things, this can have the effect of stopping the intergenerational transmission of ACEs. That's the power we have. And here in the red columns, we can see the lower percentage of parental depression when reciprocity is high. Look at the difference. So we have reciprocity, we have lower levels of depression for parents. Okay, now let's talk, now that we have talked about ACEs, and we have talked about, just a second. I think I'm in the wrong slide again. Okay, here. Now that you have already reviewed ACEs science and resilience science, let's get ready for our conversation by taking a look at some resources and tools that you can become very familiar with to help us position ourselves in the conversation and to match our families and friends' needs with the best approach for them. So here's where, sorry.
I think this is a good point for us to ask them what questions do they have so far. We've covered a lot of information. What do you think?
That's excellent, yes. Let's give a pause for maybe a few questions that you may have so far.
First question is, can ACEs ever truly be resolved in a person?
What means being truly resolved, right? We talk about healing, and when you say about resolve, we are talking about we're not forgetting or erasing memories of past adversity, for example, right? We don't have that power, but we can remember with less pain. We can learn how to talk about it. Maybe you have seen people who they are not able to talk or share their childhood adversities. And then one day they start talking about it, and they talk about it and they're crying and they're having a hard time and they're confused, and they talk about it more or less. And then along the lines in their development and exposure to support and help, they one day may sit with you and share with you the whole story in a calmer way. They may even cry, and that's fine. Crying is not a problem. But they may even, they are able to revisit that with less pain. So maybe we cannot, if you understand, I forgot the word, but if you resolving ACEs as erasing those memories, no, we can remember with less pain. Now, in a community level, if you're saying, can we eradicate ACEs? It's more realistic that we talk about reducing ACEs and boosting positive childhood experiences. And you know what? This may be enough, because adversity is part of life, right? And at some level of adversity, before it becomes toxic, remember, we have positive adversity, positive stress, we have tolerable stress, and then we have toxic stress. If we can manage to keep stress at that positive and tolerable level and very minimal toxic stress, we can use our resilience and boost resilience and all the positive childhood experiences to buffer the effects of ACEs that we may reduce risk. But you don't want to talk about ACEs zero is our goal. You want to talk about reducing ACEs, and this may be enough.
I have one more question for you, and then we'll move on, Fabricia.
Okay.
It's been shared. I found that providers know ACEs on the surface level. However, they're not making the connection to the person's behavior, or perhaps are attributing behavior more to genetics than ACEs. Can you share your insights on this, and how would you respond to that?
It's all together. And this webinar, one of the purposes of this webinar is that we become more aware. We as providers, we as community workers, preventionists, we start becoming more aware and making that link. If we have this background information, this knowledge with us, if you're carrying this with us, every time you sit before a person, every time you're doing community work, we can make the link. We can look at the behavior patterns that you're mentioning and make the link and and question, right? We don't know, but that's what you're going to do next. We're going to talk about how do we know? How do we access? How do you know if this is really linked? And then what you're going to do is looking at the root causes, because what you don't want to do is just looking at people after people coming to you, community problems, just repeating, and you never stop to see, wait a minute, why this is happening? Why this is happening so often? You want to know the root cause. And when you go to the root cause, you see childhood adversity. So we need to be aware of that, and you need to bring that knowledge with us all the time. The second part of the question was, I forgot now. Can you remind me, please?
Yes, the second part was, how would you respond to that? It was, can you share your insights on this, and how would you respond to that? And they were talking about
Genetics.
surface level.
Yes, so toxic stress affects neurobiology. Toxic stress affects how our nervous systems work. It's almost like saying it causes a malfunctioning in our nervous system. So there is a direct correlation with things that happen in the environment, right? When you're talking about ACEs, we are talking about abuse, neglect, and some others that are not included in the ACEs study, such as homelessness, poverty, bullying, and others, many others. So when you look at these environmental risks and toxic stress and adversity, they will produce a direct effect in our biology. They will change our bodies, our brains, how our body functions. They will cause that malfunctioning in our nervous system that we may develop this responses of being hyper aroused or respond too strongly emotionally in certain situations. Kind of our brain may give that interpretation to external factors as almost everything being a threat, and preparing the body to fight and flight, or shutting down and not paralyzing, mobilizing type of response. So this is a kind of malfunction that happens. And this can also shape our DNAs, remember, and our biology. That's why we also talk about epigenetics, and we talk about this being transmitted actually throughout generations. So they are related. They are not separated. They are connected. Yes, it's not only all these behaviors that you're showing, they are in your genetics. Like you have the genes for substance misuse. We are looking at how the environmental adversity created this malfunctioning, and substance use may have been an adaptation, an attempt to adapt to certain circumstances. And this can also become part of the person's biology and genetics, and it can be transmitted from across generations.
That's it. Let's go ahead and continue on now. Thank you, Fabricia, for allowing.
You're welcome. I love the questions. Thank you for asking. And I try to take some time to answer, but we need to move on to the next part. So let's talk about these preparation tools. I want you to feel, if you answer in the beginning that you don't have enough knowledge or confidence, you don't know, you don't have the tools, you don't have that anymore, because you have the tools now, okay? You're doing it now, right now, you're doing this, not later, it's not a homework. So we have what you need. We're gonna go over the ACEs questionnaire, the resilience questionnaire, 10 protective experiences children need to prevent risk and promote resilience, some fact sheets, technical package, videos, infographics, and we also prepared handouts for you with resources. Some people answered in the initial question, I don't know how to start the conversation. How do we start? So you're gonna practice this now. So the first thing is the ACEs questionnaire. Don't worry that you're gonna have all of that, okay? You're gonna have access to the ACEs questionnaire. But I put there in the slide, so if you're not familiar with the ACEs questionnaire yet, just take a quick look at it in the first questions, okay? It's before the age of 18. Did you feel like you didn't have enough to eat? Did your parents were divorced? Did your parents use physical discipline with you? And etc. So basically, these are 10 questions like that we can compose the ACEs questionnaire. So the ACEs questionnaire is a tool, and you may think, should I use it or not? Am I prepared? Am I not? Is this good or bad? I know there's a lot of conflict. So note that the ACEs questionnaire cannot access frequency, intensity, chronicity, and gender differences. Okay, a lot of things are not included there. We know that. ACEs are not created equal and do not measure systemic adversity that is embedded in communities such as poverty, discrimination, lack of opportunity. But how do we decide? How do you now decide we are using it or we are not? The first aspect to consider is your own level of comfort with completing it with your communities or families you work with. Also, maybe you want to complete it, so you become familiar and you test on yourself. How do I feel completing it? Understanding the effects of your own ACEs can influence your ability to connect with the people you work with in a very real and genuine way. If you already know, my ACE score is a 4, I already know that. I may not share with you which ones, and I prefer it that way, but I can already come with you with certain ability to relate with you. And sometimes if it's helpful and we can sense if it's going to be helpful, we may even disclose it here and there. So you can be empowered by your knowledge to empower them to change their life narrative from fear and confusion to a narrative of meaning and purpose. Second, it is important that you understand the principles of trauma-informed care. And again, you can go to the YouTube channel from the Southwest PTTC and watch the webinars about trauma-informed care. So you know how to present the tool and be prepared to respond to their needs while withholding judgment. It is important to shift from saying or thinking, what's wrong with you? Why are you not caring about your family and using drugs so much like that? To the question of what happened to you. And think about it too. If you are a mandated reporter, when you complete the ACEs questionnaire, you have the option to do it in a way that they score at the end. They're gonna complete the questionnaire. They can do in the waiting area, they can do it with you, but it has to be quick because we don't have time. Reality is that. And you may decide to do that in a way that you don't identify which ACEs the person is saying yes or no. So you only have the final score. Okay, from these 10 questions, how many yeses do you have? 5, 6, 7. You know the total, but you don't know each ones. How this can benefit you and have the advantage. This will give you a lot of information. If you are mandated reporter, meaning if people are before you, let's say you're talking to a family and they say yes for physical abuse, neglect, you have to make a report to Child Protective Services, right? And you have to have shared that with the family. Like if you report the limits of the whole confidentiality, if you report certain things like this and this and this and that, I'm a mandated reporter and I have to report this to CPS. So if you think this, you prevent them from sharing, which I have found cases that it didn't prevent them from sharing. They shared it anyways because part of them wanted to let someone know and wanted help. So if you don't want to get into that, you may not need to know which ones, right? They say yes or no. So the ACE score is not a diagnostic tool, okay? It's just a screening. And some people may feel a little bit disturbed when they complete the ACEs questionnaire. So you have to really use your judgment and your knowledge of your community or the people, the population that you're working with to determine if and how you should use the ACEs questionnaire. Remember to offer them choices. Okay, remember that it should be optional, and keep it without details. If they start telling a lot of stories, if they start completing and pausing and telling you the story about that, you may need to gently pause them and saying, it's very important that you're saying that and sharing that, but maybe that you don't have time to allow them to complete that and leave the place recovered from visiting these memories that we are sharing. And this might not be your job, but somebody else's. It's someone who complements your job. But think about it. You as a preventionist, you working with your community, you know your community, and you may open the door for this conversation. And it's very important that you do that you feel comfortable enough, that you tell them, that you communicate to them. There is room for you to talk about it here, even if it's not right now with full details. It's so important that you're sharing this. We welcome this. We are looking at this. We are taking this into consideration. And your reaction to this, being so receptive to this, may change how they're going to continue their whole treatment and journey of healing from that moment that they sat with you. The resilience questionnaire, there's more. There's more that you could go into details about it. The resilience questionnaire now. You may think, oh, great, now let's give some relief and hope for this family or for this client, this community member, and complete the resilience questionnaire. That could be the case, and many times it is. However, I have learned this from my own experience. Be mindful that it can be quite the opposite. If a person answers nobody, no one, nothing, zero, the resilience questionnaire is a zero. No one was there for me. This can also be a moment of realizing how alone, how abandoned, or how unsupported they were. So this can also trigger, sadness and grief. Can you imagine like realizing I had nobody? I answered no, nothing. Like definitely not true to all these questions. So you may want to take some time and look at this resilience questionnaire. I believe that my mother loved me when I was little. I believe that my father loved me when I was little. When I was little, other people helped my mother and father to take care of me. So just be familiar with what is it asking. Read through these questions, answer this for yourself, practice with yourself, see what your resilience score is, and kind of play a little bit more with that. But here you have a good idea already how this should work. So now another tool we can use is to look at this list based on some studies. And again, memorize, keep that up front in your mind, not on the background, not like background information, right? What are these 10 protective experiences children need to prevent risk and promote resilience? And start identifying this with the families or community members that you work with. So think about it. You just completed the ACEs questionnaire, for example, and the person's reacting by expressing some like feeling down or worried about it, some anxiety about it. How great it would be if you have the time and come up with this list and find together with the person maybe 5 or less or some protective experiences they had, and then explaining to them their power in buffer the negative effects of ACEs. It's almost like, okay, if the person is under distress because we just completed the ACEs questionnaire, we talked about ACEs, this may comfort the person. Now, if your case is the opposite, the person's more in a sense of not making the connection, not sharing anything, or saying that there's no adversity in the family, nothing could ever explain those behaviors and everything was perfect, or in a way that you kind of suspect that maybe they're not sharing, they're not finding that space, or they're not in that space of admitting or sharing or recognizing ACEs. So you may want to give more attention to ACEs, right? You want to bring the ACEs awareness to that community. If they are not talking at all about ACEs and say, we don't have ACEs here, no ACEs, nothing. So you have to know this movement, from ACEs, distress, resilience, comfort. And you have to play this back and forth depending on what you notice it's needed in that community. So a survey by Morris and others collected data from ethnically diverse families, asking parents to complete this 10-item ACEs questionnaire, as well as a 10-item protective and compensatory experiences ACEs questionnaire, assessing relationships and resources. And these that you can see there, that you may be reading as I'm talking, are the results, right? Like, look at some of this. An adult other than a parent that they can trust, a home that is clean and safe with enough food to eat. So these are the 10 protective experiences that you want to be mindful, that you want to ask them, that you want to access your communities. So very quickly now in the chat, see if you can answer, how do you see yourself using these tools to start conversations in your community? Do you see yourself like, okay, I have the ACEs questionnaire, I have the PACES, that's 7 factors, I have the 10 resilience protective factors, I have the resilience questionnaire, I have fact sheets, I have technical package, videos, infographics. Do you see how, if you become familiar with all of this, you can have a toolbox that when you go there, you have some conversation starters. Yes, some people are saying. Excellent. Diane is saying building PCs into evaluation for child behavior needs. Excellent. Okay. Thank you for sharing this feedback. I feel happy to hear this good news. So we are sharing, and the Southwest PTTC is so great in creating handouts and things. And, when you leave this workshop, you have things. You have things that you're going to use with examples, right? In the handout, we have examples of how to use the conversation starters. If you say, I don't know how to start a conversation, we are helping you to give you words how to start that conversation. And there are plenty of fact sheets, infographics, excellent materials that we can use as a conversation starter. So this is Nadine Burke Harris, the Canadian-American pediatrician who was the Surgeon General of California between 2019 and 2022. She's the first person appointed to that position. She's known for linking adverse childhood experiences and toxic stress with harmful effects to health later in life. In this picture, she's quoting a woman's reactions to learning about ACEs. I highly encourage you to read this book, The Deepest Well, Healing the Long-Term Effects of Childhood Trauma and Adversity. This is amazing. This is the whole story of how she started and how it teaches us how to, and then we have all this information about ACEs. What do we do with that? So I encourage you to also read, it's called The Deepest Well. Now, more information on materials, the CDC, you can have this to use the ACEs talk. In the handouts, you have how to introduce the ACEs talk and some tips. For example, how to start a conversation. right? You can use open-ended questions. You can say, have you ever thought about this that you're talking now, these behaviors, having a link with these things that you mentioned before about your past? And start bringing that awareness and making that link. You can use the materials to also say, sometimes people hold this fact sheets and they're looking at it. You can talk to them about it. Oh, I see you got one of our materials. What do you think that it's interesting about that? What speaks to you? And you can go from there. That can be an opening for a conversation. So we can also use this informational material and some troubleshooting. I wanted to talk about this part because it also may help you feel confident about managing difficult situations. If a family or community or individual starts getting agitated, overly emotional, or too quiet, shutting down, zooming out, you can say something like, I have to pause you for a moment, and then debrief, explain why, using a tone of voice and manner for co-regulating. If the person's agitated, you are calm. If the person is too shutting down, you are a little bit more energized. So after the person's calmer, you may say, there's a safe way for you to share and process these memories and experiences and manage the natural overwhelm that happens when you may be triggered when you talk about it. I'd like to help you to connect with the resources available for that. So for now, I can help you with this and this and that, but I do give you some resources. How does it sound to you? Or I'm noticing that when you started talking about it, you lost focus a little bit, or I noticed that your breathing started becoming faster. I can notice some facial expressions. How are you feeling right now? And then you decide if you continue, if you stop. If you just pause and then continue, you have to know how to read what is happening in the situation. You don't want to stop someone from having the moment of connection with you and the willingness to share, perhaps for the first time, something that have never shared with anybody. But also you want to have the time for that. You want to know if you are the right person for that, the right moment. And if you're not, you want to very gently receive that and validate the importance of sharing that and connect them with the right resources for that. So here I want to share a video of the ACEs awareness stories that can help us kind of summarize what we have been talking about.
The term, the toxic stress response, actually refers to the prolonged activation of our body's stress response, the release of all those stress hormones like adrenaline and cortisol and all of those things that go along with our stress response. And then also the ways in which that affects our bodies. Children are especially
I apologize.
Vulnerable to this repeated activation of the stress response because their brains and bodies are just developing. So high doses of adversity in children actually changes the way their brains develop. It changes the way their hormonal systems develop, their immune system develops, and even the way their DNA is read and transcribed. And those long-term changes are what we refer to as the toxic stress response. When we understand what happens in our bodies with the toxic stress response, and we understand that it's that prolonged activation of our stress response, then step one is really understanding what are the things that help to regulate our stress response. And immediately at that point, we begin decreasing the harm that happened as a result of our past experiences. So things like mindfulness, right? Meditation, spending time in nature, mental health interventions, regular exercise, nutritional strategies, and my favorite, healthy relationships. All of these things are really scientifically demonstrated to help to regulate the biological stress response, and they improve our outcomes for those of us who have experienced ACEs. These nurturing relationships, they feel good, which is good, of course, but they literally change our biology. When we have safe, stable, and nurturing relationships in our lives, it improves our neurologic functioning, it improves our hormonal regulation, it improves our immune functioning, and these social supports are critical part of healing. If we all understand our role in being a source of buffering care to a young person in need, that is truly transformative. ACEs are not destiny. Even if someone has experienced significant ACEs, it doesn't mean that they are absolutely going to have these negative outcomes. Recognizing our ACEs requires us to recognize our vulnerability. And that can be really scary. But it also is the place where we get a chance to ask for what we need. I deeply believe that we can cut ACEs and toxic stress by half in one generation.
Excellent. And this is very hopeful, to end our webinar and start with the questions. I want to hold these words, of hope, and how, ACEs are not destiny, and how we can definitely work with boosting positive experiences and healing. And I thank you so much for your participation, and I'd like to have some time for questions.
Thank you so much, Fabricia. That has been so informative. There are a few people who have posted questions in the chat as we were going through, and right now you have the time to ask those questions now. If you'd like to unmute your microphone and ask the questions, or if you'd like to repost them in the chat, we'll entertain them there. This is your time, and we need to know, what are your questions? I am looking in the chat now. How can I get the handouts and slides? They will be sent to everyone who attended today and completes the evaluation. It usually takes about a week to a week and a half for you to receive them, but you will get an email with a link to take you to all the resources. Question: would you recommend this being used by non-clinicians in the community? And would you recommend this be used in peer support, by peer support specialists?
Yes, as long as you have training in ACEs or community resilience model, or you have trauma-informed care training, and you as a peer, I think it's a very powerful, especially as a peer specialist. Peer specialists are that presence, of non-judgmental, or I know, I can relate with you. I know from my own personal experience, or from the experience of others that I work with, that, these happen. So if you decide to do that, you have to, again, be comfortable personally. You have to have some form of, ACEs training, trauma-informed care training, community resilience model training, that you know how to help people to self-regulate. You can regulate with them in their presence. And if you will still feel like you don't feel so comfortable doing that because you're not a clinician and it can go in certain ways, you may use the the form without identifying which ACEs the person saying yes or no to, right? You can just allow them to answer and give you their total score, so that when they tell you, well, I have an ACE score of 5, you already know the statistics. 5, they have 5 times higher risk of suicide. They have these, so where you are. They already gave you a lot of information that may be enough, right? You don't need to perhaps know all the story. And if you are in a position that you are the best person to open that door for them and point them to a direction of additional resources that they may need, maybe they need recovery, they need a program, they need other things, but they started with you. You are that presence that could react to their expression of ACEs and helping them to make the link and saying, do you think maybe you could benefit from this? Maybe you can be that person, but it doesn't mean that you have to be their therapist and hear all the stories and saying, okay, we're going to treat this trauma now. You may not be in the treatment, but you as a preventionist, as a peer specialist, a community support individual, you want to be prepared for that. And someone else had asked a similar question. I cannot go back now. Let me see. It was a little bit similar.
Your next question, are pediatricians screening for ACEs?
Yes, pediatricians are jumping right on it and in many places, starting to screen for ACEs. And again, in this book, you see how they develop different because of time and because it has to be multidisciplinary. The pediatrician itself, having 20 people in their waiting room to see in one afternoon, perhaps cannot screen everybody and have that report and give that time to everybody, but they can start the conversation. And then in their clinic where they work with, and that's what we need to do, bring the PACEs talk in your staff meetings. Add that, couple that PACEs talk and assessments in the work that you're already doing in your community. We have to couple that. We have to add that and work in as a team. It's not a one-person job. Like you as a one person won't be able to assess, identify, treat, and find and connect them and link them with resources and be the support that they need. Like it's a job of multiple departments, people. So we have to understand, what is my role on that? Where do I fit on that? And prepare to do that part. Your part might be minimum, but if you don't do that part, maybe what follows won't happen.
Next question is, well, it's an affirming question. Didn't the ACEs list for what qualifies change? And is there an updated list? And then she added on there, is there an updated test, not list?
So the ACE questionnaire, the 10 questions, right? There are many adaptations. Even the BRFSS started asking 8 instead of 10. So depending on the community you work with, and also because the ACEs don't take into consideration those community level of adversity that we mentioned, like racism, poverty, discrimination, you may want to use, and that's what they did when they started in the clinic in San Francisco, to develop what is a better tool and assessment that you can do faster, maybe in 3 minutes, where you would have the answers that speaks more to this specific community, right? You want to be able to add or remove or create and use the ones that were already created, to respond to the specific needs of your community.
And here is a real good one. I know you'll love this one, Fabricia. Are there any additional resources for more formal training for ACEs? And I know you had a whole plethora of resources that you wanted to share, but we just didn't have time to share it today. So you want to talk about that?
Yes. These are all great questions, and I see how motivated everyone is to jump in and help. I definitely recommend everyone to have, a toolbox, literally, like to have, files, in your computer or on paper, like that you have plenty of resources. And we prepared for you, right, Derek? We have a handout with several links, with several resources, with examples of conversation starters that you can use, with how to use a resource to start a conversation, and training and all of that. So you can, in Georgia, in my state, it's been predominant, the community resilience model, as a training to be able to not only identify adversity, but the part of self-regulation, the part of how do we learn to use our bodies to self-regulate. And if you remember the video from Dr. Burks, a very important piece of ACEs and working with ACEs is that we know that malfunctioning that happened in our bodies as a consequence of ACEs can be, we can help that malfunctioning, basically learning how to self-regulate, learning grounding techniques, learning how to be in our bodies. And sometimes trauma takes that away from us. We lose that. You lose control. We don't have power and control, and you don't live in our bodies. So we need to learn simple tools that everyone can have, because we only need our bodies. We don't need fancy equipment, devices, or anything, but we can use our own bodies to start that, learning these tools, and start recovery in our bodies. Trauma, toxic stress is in the body, right? We need to help the body to recover. So sometimes we dedicate a lot of attention to recover other things, other dimensions, other parts of our lives. And we need to look at our nervous system and say, hey, there's a malfunctioning here. I think we need some recovery and repairment here too. So I encourage everyone to do that.
Okay, the time now is 12:58. So we need to go ahead and move on to our next slide. Whatever questions that you still continue to share with them, we will definitely share them with Fabricia, and I'll work with her to get answers to those questions that didn't get answered today. But we need your feedback. It is extremely important to us, as well as the congratulations and kudos to Fabricia. So if you have a smartphone, you can use this QR code and provide your feedback that way. There's also a link that's been provided in the chat. You can click on that and provide your feedback that way. And if all else fails, once we close this session, you'll get a pop-up if your computer allows pop-ups, and you'll be able to complete the survey that way. So we're giving you multiple ways to complete our survey. Most of all, we want to thank Fabricia for being with us today. You can move to the next slide, and spending her time with us. We are your resource. As the Region 6 PTTC, we're here for you. We have multiple courses that we've already provided on ACEs, so you can catch up and continue the conversation. And your feedback is extremely important to us. We want you to come to our website and access those resources at Southwest PTTC. And also, we want you to join our mailing list so that when new information is available, and we can send that out to you and share that with you on a rapid platform. And then we also have other products and resources that you'll find on our website. And as far as technical assistance, we're here for you. So when you have those questions that come up, or you have different resources that you need, we're also the ones to contact. You can contact me as your TTA specialist for this region. Let me know what you need for your state. And as you're tackling topics, not only dealing with ACEs, but some of the fallout of ACEs as well, and especially related to prevention, so that we can help you or redirect you to the right place for you to be. We are here for you as a resource. So it's now 1 o'clock. Next slide. I want to thank you very much for attending today. We do have our references that are available, and they will be shared with you when we share the whole slide deck with you. So have no fear. And also the additional resources, you will receive them as well. And as you can see, they will have the links for all the different topics and resources that we talked about today as well to help you.